that we have to adapt to today's children. I think we got to find a happy medium. And I think one of the biggest things that we have to do with that is creativity and being okay to try something new to see if it works. And if it doesn't work, just go back to the drawing board and try it again. I think we need to make sure we just don't worry about being perfect or be about being right all the time, but about that learning, got to be struggle with that learning. It's okay to fail. It's okay to get something wrong, but that's part of that learning process we're missing. We don't always have to be right all the time. And that's from the educator side and the student side.
It's a great point.
You're making, like I said, I've been out of the school building for 3 years. So Marcellus, my impression of that anecdote is that you're doing such a good job, like evolving to the Common Core math. My struggle with teachers was having them let go of the fluency and being able to like lean into the reasoning. And I'm finding myself struggle with it now, like helping my first grader with her math.
All right, y'all ready?
Yep.
All right, let's get to it. Welcome back to another session of Academic Therapy, the place where we unpack not just what's happening in education, but what happens to educators. I'm your host, Michael Coates, and today we're diving into a big one, the evolution of education and where it's headed. Today, I have a phenomenal panel. I'm going to introduce them, allow them just to express who they are in education and where their journey is taking them thus far. We'll go ahead and start with the ladies first. Miss Alana Gali.
Thank you for having me, Mike. My name is Alana Gali. I started my journey, I think 16 or 17 years ago now. Taught with Mike way back when we were both, classroom teachers. I was still learned a lot from him and some other friends. And I continued my journey on as a middle school history teacher, became an assistant principal and eventually a principal in a public district. And I am now working for a nonprofit at systems level leadership. So it's been a really interesting, exciting learning experience later in my mid-career. So
Awesome.
good to be here.
Thank you for sharing. All right, now we have the incomparable Mr. Marcellus Clement.
What's going on, guys? Mike, thanks for having me. Brother Coates, Marcellus Clement here. I've been in education for about 17 years, the last 9 as an administrator, 5 as a principal. Just glad to be here. I guess what's unique about me is the district that I work in, I grew up and was a student in that one. So being able to give back in the district that gave me an education. So happy to be here, man. I know you're doing great things with this. I'm just excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you both for joining me tonight. So let's jump right into it. We've all been in this game long enough to remember, that there was at one point we used to use chalkboards, and it was chalk dust. We used to clap them at the end of the day, erasers and all that good stuff. Overhead projectors. We tried not to smear it because you wanted to use it for the next class or the next week or the next year. And just the smell of freshly laminated seating charts. But let's fast forward. Times have changed in education. We are definitely a lot more tech savvy, a lot more tech heavy. And we have entered into an era where AI tutors have taken place. Virtual learning we just overcame through the pandemic. Digital portfolios are on. So my first question to you all is education evolving or are we just upgrading? You on mute? Yeah.
I'm sorry, Lonnie, you want to go first? I'm sorry, I'm on mute. You want to go first, lady first?
It's an interesting question. I'm curious what Marcellus has to say because he's still in a school building. A couple years ago when AI was first kind of on the scene and I heard people in my office, I've been out of the school building now for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard people talking about, ChatGPT, AI will grade for you. It'll contact parents for you. I was extremely skeptical. Like the dynamics of even like doing a small reading group and being able to take anecdotal notes. Like I did not have faith that AI would be able to do that. I will say I've seen things that have like started to convince me otherwise and swing the pendulum, but I'm still firmly in belief that relationships are so, so, so important in education that it will never replace that. Like we see stories about people having, relationships with ChatGPT or like asking them for advice and it like evolving as a companion, but you will never replace the human relationship that and as a parent now, um, like I would never be happy knowing that my child was being taught by AI. Be okay with it as a teacher using it as an intentional tool in my work to help, but I think that it just has to be intentional. We have to be careful. We have to be researched. So I'm very curious about what Marcellus has to say about how it is being used in school buildings.
So it's very interesting that you say that because when I think about AI or just overall the resources that we use within our school, it's like you think about when you go to a grocery store and do you go through a cashier or do you go to the self checkout? Both are easily resources, but what is going to give you one, the instant feedback that you're going to get to be success, or are you going to need that customer service in order to, get that interaction where you're learning by doing from a person that's working with you? And when you think about education that's gone, and I'm even talking about in the last 17 years that I've just been in it now and currently still in it, um, is it working for all the resources that we have to make it easier? Is that allowing us to be more successful, or is that hindering what we're trying to do? Like pretty much so. Like if we grew up tying our shoes, and you got the bunny ears and the cross or whatever formation you want to tie your shoes, if we have it where you just put your foot in the box and your shoes are automatically tied, are we taking away an essential skill in order for us to learn through life and not just what can be the best foundation for a test score? So it's very dynamic about what education is trending to. And I want to make sure we get everything accessible for people. But there's certain things that we still have to earn and go by doing. And what was the key word that we just mentioned here was relationships, as far as how you connect with a physical person in order to do that. Because you learn a lot by doing that.
Absolutely. I know for me, I think the biggest concern, and it kind of aligns with what Alana was saying, is just that I always was taught and I always believed that an educator, the person, the human, the body was the main key thing that would make the most impact in a student's academic achievement. Yes, AI and technology has advanced, immeasurably to a degree, but now it's almost becoming like, is this the only piece that we're going to really focus on is utilizing this type of technology? But on the flip of that, I also want to make sure we are not shying away from it because obviously it's here and it's here to stay. But I think if we truly want to make sure that our students are utilizing it and being productive with it, we have to actually step out of our comfort zone and teach them what the uses of it are and how it can be beneficial in the long run. Not just using chat GPT just to look up an answer, but how allowing it to use that as a thought partner to make your work a lot more productive in essence. So I definitely I think it's a slippery slope when we start talking about things like AI. But we do have to get in the shift of really educating our students on how to use them appropriately. So speaking of shifts, um, what's the shift? If the shift in what is learning, what does that truly mean? Once upon a time, education was about memorization. Now it's about application. Tomorrow, it might even be about adaptation. So let's get into this. What do you all believe, or what does learning even mean in 2025?
Ooh, this is interesting because I would say this part of my job that I have to do is having goal setting conferences for teachers. And one of the things that we talk about with those goal setting conferences is, you know, what is the way that you want to strive for your goal? That may be a school or district goal, but how do you get that? And I've been working with math teachers this year, and what's been very interesting is hearing the difference between reasoning based applications when you go through mathematics, and for the old school people that know this, the word problems versus the fluency. And when I heard some conferences about what the teachers are doing about what is the bigger struggle, it is the fluency. And it's very interesting to hear that because as you just said, Mike, when you talk about the learning application, is there certain things that you should know just memorization off the top of your head? Because if you know those and you don't have to even think about it, that could be part of your reasoning. So for example, if we think about those old school timetables that we have, and like 2 times 1 is 2, 2 times 2 is 4, that should become automatic. But is that something that through the learning process, are we losing that now? Because we're going on different theories that we have to go. What is your interpretation? What is your thinking? And it's just two different ways of doing it, but is one way better than the other? It's like that's what we're still trying to figure out. But just hearing these conferences this year, it's just been very interesting to see about how fluency is still a need, but how do we still grasp some of those, I guess, older concepts that was very successful, let's say in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, that we have to adapt to today's children. I think we got to find a happy medium. And I think one of the biggest things that we have to do with that is creativity and being okay to try something new to see if it works. And if it doesn't work, just go back to the drawing board and try it again. I think we need to make sure we just don't worry about being perfect or be about being right all the time, but about that learning. Sometimes we got to be struggle with that learning. It's okay to fail. It's okay to get something wrong, but that's part of that learning process we're missing. We don't always have to be right all the time. And that's from the educator side and the student side.
That's a great point.
You're making, like I said, I've been out of the school building for 3 years. So Marcellus, my impression of that anecdote is that you're doing such a good job, like evolving to the Common Core math. My struggle with teachers was having them let go of the fluency and being able to like lean into the reasoning. And on the
Mm,
other hand, I'm finding myself struggle with it now, like helping my first grader with her math homework. Like we spend so much time just like understanding number sense and being able to um like reason that like I don't know. I just want to tell her to count on her fingers. Like we know that. So I think like kudos to you that your teachers are like leaning into the reasoning and being able to do the application. I found that was the hardest thing for my especially veteran teachers to let go of. So I just echo what Marcellus is saying, that like finding a happy medium, especially those of us who grew up in the 80s and 90s learning the old school way, and then having to teach the new school way. So and then to me, the kids always have to be the North Star. Like we are learning, but we cannot leave them behind as we are learning. So like the urgency also has to be there as we're adapting and evolving.
yeah, that's very true. That's very true. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Like,
All right. So let's keep the conversation going. Definitely, I think I agree wholeheartedly with you on that. As we begin to look at the true 21st century learner, we have to adapt to how we're supposed to be teaching them. And I know for me, I've always had an issue with, I guess, what you consider the assembly line of education. And what I mean by that is just that the way that our education system is set up is that every kid learns at the same rate. And I don't believe that that's true necessarily. I think, sometimes the light bulb goes off for certain kids at certain times. And it may be earlier in their educational career or it may be later in their educational career. But I just think the way that we have it structured, we kind of fall into that gap of what John D. Rockefeller wanted, where he said, I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers. In essence, that's kind of what we are creating at this time. So, like, how are we shifting that mindset to truly create um, those opportunities for our students to become those thinkers? And I know Alana, now that you transitioned into working for a nonprofit, I'm not sure what's that like from that aspect. Like, how are you all supporting or advocating for educational improvement?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've learned a lot leaving the school building about the bureaucracy and politics behind what comes down the line. Even principal, it was like an honor to lead a school building, but you're truly in a large district, still a middle manager, and having to execute policy from higher ups. Um, but it is sometimes disheartening to see how decisions are made, but sometimes it's enlightening. So at least in my nonprofit, we try to um, elevate, things that are working in certain schools, and we try to work with all sectors, private, public, district, and charter. So to answer your question about how to like accommodate like different learning styles and how do we shift to, away from the old style of making sure everybody's on the same page at the same times is just if something's working in one school building in a district, trying to like highlight it, replicate it, create learning spaces for adults to be able to learn how to do it, because sometimes it's not a teacher or a building leader's fault um, that their students aren't, it could be a lack of knowledge, it could be a lack of resources. So just it's the difference between leaving like working in a school building and outside a school building is like we have time as adults to like observe, learn, gather information, research, and then implement. So we try to be able to support school building leaders who are, you know I know the life that you're living when you're a principal and it's nonstop and you don't have a free second to eat, think. You're making like really high stakes decisions at every minute that impact a lot of people. So we just try to observe and learn and replicate and support. And part of that, to answer your question, is like, how do you accommodate different types of learners?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we do have a new guest. It's the Young. I'm not sure if you wanted to chime in regards to what you believe the shift in learning, what does that truly mean?
I heard you guys talking about it, and you guys used AI and so forth, but and I think that though we definitely have to incorporate these pieces. I think that they should be a thought partner. I think that so I at my school I've incorporated a no show protocol that they were talking about in relay, and we use it in math, and just to get my teachers to understand what the standard is asking for them to do, and what are they asking for students to know, and what are they asking them to show. And sometimes, because I mean, even if as a teacher, you may see the word fraction, say, "Oh, they just want to learn how to do add, subtract, multiply, fraction," but it may say fractions on the number line. It may say model the fractions, like, and so asking them what they need to know and what they need to show. So, we definitely use the AI component to us. Chat GPT, what does it mean for them to know? Show us a no show protocol for those for that standard, whatever, and so forth. But I think I heard you guys talking about like it's certain things that you have to know by rote memory, and when you talk about math, all math is add, subtract, and multiplying and dividing. And if you can't do that, those are the foundations of mathematics. And so what I found is like, I think sometimes we lean so far into the modeling and reasoning that like, so I had like, because I was a math teacher. So I just went off on my son. You know what I'm saying? Like he was in the fifth grade and like they were doing 2-digit multiplication. And I'm like, 27 times 35, 5 times 7 is what? Put the zero down there for the place value. And he was like, he drawing all these boxes. And it's like, you know what I'm saying? Like you draw these boxes in 27, 20 plus 7 up here and 30 plus 5. And I had to remind myself that they didn't even teach him the algorithm way. They taught him the straight modeling way, and he had no clue on how to do it algorithm way. So I actually had to apologize to him the next day because I'm talking. It was my birthday too. My birthday September 17th, and I was mad on my birthday. I was going to dinner with my wife, and I was losing it. You know what I'm saying? Like, what? You don't know how to do this? Because I take pride in working with my boys and so forth. But I think there's a place for both of those, the modeling the region and the algorithm way, the way we learned it as well. But I think certain things you have to know in order to be successful in school. You have to know how to multiply. You have to know what 8 times 7 is 56. Like you have to know those things or you will always struggle. And so it's a balancing act. And so, and then when you're in this educational field with a lot of teachers who didn't even go to school for teaching, so they struggle with the pedagogy component of even knowing how to teach children that's another layer. And so when you're talking about differentiating instruction, making this stuff engaging for students, I always tell my teachers, like, you got 12, 13, 14-year-old students in here, kids in there. Do you think your class is their priority? No, it's making a TikTok. Is that girl gonna like me or not? So how do you make this, and it goes into making the content relevant for them, that domain too, you know what I'm saying, making the content important, but also how are you making this engaging? Like, what are you making, why do I have to know how to do this multiplication? Why do I need to know these fractions? And just thinking about how real world experiences in which you're using them, real world experiences, what you're seeing, you seeing it, like, you're talking about decimals. You be talking about the football season, Lamar Jackson completion percentages, and what does that mean if he throwing completing 67% and he got to throw 400 passes this year? Or, like what is 67%? How many completions? Like doing those things to engage, because as we know, African American males are our lowest performing subgroup, and so if you're not tapping into them and they're not learning, your data is never going to rise, because they're the lowest performing subgroup, and if they're not engaged in the learning process, how they're not going to, your MCAP scores are not going to go well, and you're just going to always constantly be having to justify what you're doing in your school building. And even when I'm working with teachers, and even when I'm developing a lesson plan, I always say, you need to at least tap into 3 different intelligences in this lesson. You know what I'm saying? And what is your high order question that you're going to use? And when you're talking about boys, something needs to be in their kinesthetic. Always using your visual, you're doing your auditory, but how they move, because them sitting in there for 65 minutes, 90 minutes, 7 minutes, they're going to, we as adults can't even do it. I was just in a principal meeting on Monday, and them people were talking. There was a lot of sit and get, and everybody was on their phones. And by that after lunch, ain't nobody hearing about that reading component. Except for the principal of the year, Marcellus Clement. You know what I'm saying? That principal of the year was paying attention, but everybody else was on their phones, checking emails and so forth. Because it's hard to sit for 60 straight minutes without any type of movement and so forth. And so, I mean, just think about how we learn, and really pouring into how adults learn, how children learn, and being intentional. Like, what's your high order questions? Did you build 2 or 3 of them in there? So where's the rigor? Because a lot of times, I think teachers are afraid to put rigor in their problem, because they say what the children cannot do, instead of building them up and scaffolding it until by November, they understand how to do these type 2, type 3 questions, because they're doing it so often, and you're teaching them how to go about doing it, breaking down these problems, that they understand it. But I think we put a lot of barriers and so forth on children and what they can and cannot do. And that's one of the challenges that we have in education.
So let me ask you this, Marcus. That's a great point, particularly when we're talking about going from more of a procedural to a rational or rationalization, explaining your reasoning, your thought. Well, like, do you believe that that is truly having more of an impact versus, let's say, how we came up in the 90s or 80s, and Dr. Holmes, as he jumps on back in the 70s, was just simply being more focused on the procedure, less impactful as it is today, where we're focusing more so on students' reasoning and them being able to explain their thought behind how they may have solved a math problem, or how they arrived at unlocking a particular prompt and getting the gist of a text.
Yeah, I think that we definitely ask for more reason. Why do you know this? And a lot of times as educators, I mean, as students, like, if you can explain you can explain how you know it, how you got the answer, I understand how to do it. So a lot of times, especially when I was in the classroom, I did error analysis. Why is this wrong? Why is this, is the misstep in this problem? Because if you can explain why it's wrong, then you've mastered that skill or that standard to know how to go about solving the problem. And but we we try to, I think a lot of teachers are afraid to ask for reasoning, because it takes more out of you, and it's labor intensive, like, especially at the beginning, especially when if children are not used to doing it. It's a lot of pulling a lot of teeth, because you have to develop a culture in your class where it's okay to take risks. And a lot of times that's not the case. And so it's okay to take risks. It's okay to be wrong. But we're gonna figure out why this is wrong and why and how we can correct it as a group. And just and you know, and just we just sometimes label. I mean, and we I think the expectations are lowered by teachers sometimes by different sections, and so then it makes the children say, "I'm an 802, so I'm not as smart as those children in 804." Like they know their sections, they know where the higher ability children are in, and so I mean, it's just we just have to make sure that we are the standard is the standard. And that's what I try to tell my teachers all the time. Standard is the standard. We're not lowering the standard. We're going to scaffold and get children to the standard, but we're not going to lower the standard for them. And getting them to believe, because a lot of times I don't think the educators believe that the children can do it. And it's sad and it's heartbreaking. And sometimes you have to give them, so like I tell them, I grew up 2 miles from my school without my friends were. I would have been going to this school. I know it's good stock in this neighborhood because I come from this neighborhood. And so, stop believing that just because they come in here is 94% farm, free and reduced, that they cannot do because they can. And if we teach them, that's why they're here. We teach them, they can. That's the most challenging, like changing mindsets, I think is the most challenging thing in education. And I'll let Brother Holmes speak.
Dr. Holmes, I'm not sure if you had anything you want to chime in about, or if anybody else wanted to speak to that last question about moving from procedural to more reasoning and explaining of your thoughts concerning, when we're talking about student expectation.
It's like the first, we're all, because we learned a certain way, concerned they're not going to know the fluency and not going to
Yeah.
know the math.
Yep.
You don't know the impact yet, like until these kids enter the workforce. So yes, everything Marcus just said. Is that right? Yes, like it's all about mindset
Yes, ma'am.
and they will rise to the occasion if we believe in them. But we don't know what the impact of like this new evolution of curriculum is. And like my hope is that it's positive. Um, and time will tell.
No, that's absolutely right. We got to see with this generation when they actually get into, I guess that real world situation, what was the effort placed or that they experienced over the course of their education, K to 12, was it fruitful? But I think there was another point that came out of that, and I guess I want to ask, what if we look at the situation we're facing now? So even with the furloughs and this that, and the third, and then prior to the school year, we had so many mass vacancies, not just in our particular areas, but across the nation. We find that we're getting a lot more of transitioning career changers into education now. So not really classically trained educators. They didn't go to school necessarily for education. What impact is that having on the evolution of education? Because now, as a building leader, now I really have to pour into these individuals and give them those foundational skills, which I'm hoping and praying and expecting them to come to the table with. Now I have to build up their capacity just to understand how to break down a curriculum and how to take that information and synthesize or retrofit a lesson plan for their various sections that they may have to teach.
If I may add here, not unless, Dr. Holmes want to go first. I know he wanted to come on. Dr. Holmes, do you want to go first? Or
I was listening in until I got called out for the 70s. I was listening in until I was called out to give the 70s perspectives.
all
I,
love, all
I didn't
love.
know if seniors were welcome.
It was no light, my brother. It was just saying the different eras that are on the call right now through their educational experience. I'm an 80s baby, which I'm pretty sure the rest of us are. You might be the only seasoned brother, Dion, prior to the 80s, but it's all good. It's all love.
I appreciate that. A lot of things that's happening in education. I know we mentioned that things are yet to be seen. Things are happening very quickly. When you speak to individuals coming into education, so for example, uh, a lot of individuals, when individuals start losing their jobs in the federal government, and it was as if school districts begin to, really like, wow, yeah, we getting some more employees. I'm skeptical of that because when individuals are not trained in education, it takes a lot to really be able to convey information to another individual, especially children. Um, and so when everyone was kind of happy and say, hey, go into education, I don't believe everyone can just teach. Um, People have knowledge and in-depth knowledge of particular content areas or subject matters, but that doesn't translate into how to convey that information to teach another individual. I mean, if we use a sports analogy, Michael Jordan proved that. I mean, he's the GOAT in basketball, not coaching. His basketball ability did not translate into being a championship coach. So there's something to be said about just welcoming people into our profession and saying, "Come teach the children." I think that's some individuals have the gift to teach, and then there's some individuals who just don't. And I think that it really does not pay us the dividends that we're looking for our students when you're training someone on the job on how to deliver content that they know. So I think it can be detrimental to our kids, and it can be detrimental to us as a society, because when you look at research and we talk about when a child has one bad teacher, the impact that it has on that child for future years in their education. So if I'm coming from a profession just to get a job and I teach a group of students for a year, I could have set back those students 2, 3 years in their academic.
And just to add on that, and that's why I wanted Dr. Jeff to come on and speak first, because I was going to make a sports analogy, and he made a perfect one. I think in the scenario where we are right now as leaders, or if you are a leader trying to hire people, even come to Alana's nonprofit area, right? You come into a situation where everybody in this world has been educated at least some point. So everybody has been a student. And for what Dr. Jeff Holmes said, we've had a lot of players say, yeah, I played basketball in high school and college, but you may not be the best coach. When you're an educator, you become a coaching to students. Even though you was a student, you may have been a great student. It's different when you turn the lens and become a coach as an educator. And as leaders, when we try to hire, this kind of makes it more difficult in a way, because even though you do need the bodies to fill to make sure every student has a teacher in front of them, you want to make sure you get the quality over quantity. So you have to answer those or ask those questions that may be a little bit more difficult to navigate, as far as, do you know what it means to, handle 30 children at one time? Do you know how to handle yourself in emergency crisis? Do you have anxiety when you go through those hard situations? And it's those questions that you want to ask, but you also want to give people a chance, because sometimes people may not recognize their gift until they're in that situation where they have to, show what they can do in front of other people. But it's definitely an interesting component, because I would like to know the ratio of how many teachers do we have out here that are purebreds, which means they went to college for some type of educational foundation or teaching pedagogy, versus how many people you have as career changers that wants to come into education. And I want to see maybe the ratio of where we are now versus maybe where we back 20 years ago, where you had the foundation of most of the people that came out to teaching came from a teacher initiated program. I remember when I first started in the county, I was afraid if I was even going to have a job, because it was so competitive being in that teacher market from teachers. Now it's like, if I would have graduated or been in this generation, I probably could walk in and get a job, because of the need for certain educators too. And it may not even be an area I got a major in. I just have to have some type of college degree. But it's all about navigating the people that you can get a chance to see. And you can always build content and build knowledge, but sometimes you just can't build that natural gifted person who knows how to, once again, going back to Alana with relationships, that can just be in front of, people just to understand how to move people in the right direction.
Also want to add that, I didn't hear when we talked about individuals being furloughed or individuals losing their jobs in the federal government. I don't know. Did any of you hear any other professions that raised their hand and said, come work for us? I didn't hear someone say, well, you know what? You lost your job in the federal government. So just go be a nurse. You lost your job in the federal government. So how about just come and, be an engineer or a pilot? You know, we didn't have people, but the individuals are, well, just go teach. Everyone went to school, but everyone cannot teach. Just like many people know how to cook, but that doesn't make you a chef. I mean, there's certain things. I mean, there's certain things everyone eat, but that doesn't make you a chef. Everyone, many people cook, but so I've not heard with this whole transition from government or second career. I've not heard any other profession raise their hand and say, "Hey, we need help." There's a shortage of nurses. Okay, but we didn't tell people, come on over to the hospital. We're gonna train you to be a nurse.
No, that's funny because I always share that with a friend of mine. I said, education is one of the only career fields where they take anybody and everybody. Blind, crippled, and crazy, we're gonna take you. We'll throw you in front of somebody else's kids for 7.5 hours a day and pay you for it.
And no one even said, people didn't even say, come to the radio station, get on the radio and speak on the radio. People didn't even, come be a news broadcaster. I'm sure you can do. Everyone can talk. So you just all we have to do is give you a mic because everyone, you got your own podcast, you got your own Facebook Live, but Channel 5 didn't call you and say we need you to come work for us.
Man, what you trying to say, man?
Don't be
No,
shooting
I'm
out
just
Mike's
no.
dreams. Mike got dreams.
No offense to individuals with podcasts and Facebook Live and things of that nature, but we have to raise the standard of professionalism and help individuals, respect our profession. Everyone cannot teach. Everyone does not have the skill. You may have the will, but do you have the skill? And to prepare someone, we have to understand that education is preparing the next generation for life. Everyone doesn't have the skill to prepare an individual for life.
That's a good segue for my next topic. So where are we headed? Where are we headed? So if you will, humor me for a minute. Just let's go ahead and dream a little bit. And let's look 10 years down the line from now. What does school look like in 2035 if we can get it right? What do you envision education looking like in 2035?
I'll be close to retirement by then, I guess, huh? That's a very good question. I would even say this. It's going to be very hard to say because I wouldn't have thought 5 years ago we would have saw the advancements of what we could do during COVID, during that time. And I think that was earth shattering for a lot of people of just different ways we can use technology, use the resources to say that school can still be in session. I can throw out random things like maybe we don't have any more snow days because we will have more virtual days that we can have for instruction. Do we have some type of hybrid system where it's a way that we teach to kids in person and in virtual where it's an option that's out there for us? Maybe it's a new standard that we have for how we use even standardized tests and how that's operated on. It's so dynamic. But if I was to answer the question, I would say the one thing that I would say that I'm hopeful that can be a part of the educational pedagogy that we see in the future. How do we really tier differentiation in the right way? Because what we're seeing now more and more is the need for, like in a classroom of 30 kids, it may be 6 different things that we have to teach at the same time, but we got to teach it in a different way. But how do we teach that for the students of the capabilities, like you said, Mike, earlier, or even Marcus, rather, we got a 65-minute class or 70-minute class or even 90-minute class. how do we maximize everything we do in that time, but fit the need of every student that's in there? And we're not even talking about disabilities. We're not even talking about students that speak different languages. It's going to be very dynamic where you're going to have to really be an octopus to make sure you can do 8 things at the same time and really be diverse. But as you said, Dr. Jeff, you have to be a professional with that. So do we uphold our standards to make sure as professional educators or where we are, is it a standard that we got to meet or achieve once again to shows that we're truly pros in this line of work? Like you mentioned about professional athletes or with doctors and nurses, do we need to uphold the standards of who's really setting the tone in education? But it's very open-ended.
I think if I can, if I would answer that question, are you asking what I hope it would look like, or what do I believe it will look like?
Let's do both. What do you hope it would look like, and then what do you believe it's going to look like with the way the current status quo is?
I would hope that with all the information that we have now in terms of professional development, I would hope individuals will take responsibility for their own growth and development to become better at whatever role they play in education. What I believe is education in 10 years, which is it's not far away. In 10 years, it's going to look like it looks today, barring a major catastrophe like a pandemic. So just think about before the pandemic, what changed in education before the pandemic forced us to change. We went from chalkboards to smartboards.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the pandemic forced us to change education in some ways. And we still have individuals reverting back to what it was.
Mm.
So barring
Okay.
a global catastrophe, education is going to look just like it looks today.
Mm.
Let me ask you this, Dr. Holmes. How do you think the political climate may dictate education? Because when you talk about education, the way we talk about things now, like we didn't know even the world would look like the way it is in the last 6, 7 months. How do you think the political climate will dictate how education will be in the next 5, 10 years?
So once again, the political temperature in education increased because of the pandemic, right? When the pandemic came, everyone had an answer for schools. People who never thought about schools had an answer. Oh, it's time for the students to go back. Or they can go back without the shot. They need to wear masks. It became the temperature in terms of politics increased. I think to your question, Marcus, people are not, once people get their hands politically around education, many folks don't let go. I think in terms of politics, and just look at our country, everyone that runs in any political office, education is the topic, right? But how much has been changed in education? Everyone runs on improving education, and many people, say, oh, we're going to lower class size. How you going to do that when you have a teacher shortage? I'm just, those are types of questions that I ask politicians. Education will still be a buzzword for politicians, with very little solutions.
Anybody else want to chime in? What do
Think
you
it's
believe? Go ahead, Alana.
say I just have hopes about solutions. So like some of your previous questions were reverberating when you asked this question. My hope is that the push into technology that happened during COVID and the push with AI will be refined, and then we can, like, even with large class sizes, be using it much more intentionally instead of experimentally like we are now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, another hope I have, the work I do now is a lot to do with like enrollment and um, I've learned a lot about that I didn't know while I was in a school building, like how we have not just a teacher shortage, but we also have nationally declining enrollment. So, like all of that combined is that resources are stretched, and that's impacting achievement, which is what you as building leaders are trying to achieve. But you're not thinking about national enrollment and how well you probably are during budget season, how your resources are affected by the number of students and the number of staff that you have. So my hope is that, and a lot of our work is trying to solve that and right size the district that I work in. So my hope is that that operational solution can be found within 10 years so that we ease the pressure on those who are doing the hardest work, which is that student achievement, and that's teachers and building leaders.
When you say enrollment is declining, you're talking for public education, correct? Or just enroll? Could you clarify when you say enrollment is declining?
But also, school age children are declining. People are having less children. Like there are less children, and we still have, too many school buildings. So the district where I'm at is we have empty school buildings, we have half-built school buildings, and those and combine that with the teacher shortage, like resources are stressed, instruction is suffering, and thus children are suffering or not achieving as high. So I just I've learned a lot from leaving a school building about how the systems that you all are working within, if we can improve that, we ease the pressure on you and make your jobs easier.
And to that point, I will say individuals um, moving forward in education, even 10 years from now, individuals are going to be looking for alternatives. So, for example, over the last, 20, 30 years, been a big boom around homeschooling, right? The homeschool boom came in. So, um, again, public education resources are being reduced because it's based upon enrollment and how many kids are in the building. So I think 10 years from now, Michael, that individuals are going to be seeking alternatives
Mm.
to the traditional public education brick and mortar schoolhouse. Because again, after the pandemic, there were online schools before the pandemic, but online schools increased after the pandemic. So that's when I speak to barring a global catastrophe. Um, we in education, we don't like change, right? We just kind of stick our heels in and we just kind of stay until we're forced to do something different.
Mm.
When people are talking about, and another thing that will also I believe that will make individuals seek alternative education is school safety. Individuals are concerned about the safety of their children in school. So individuals are looking for something different um, that feels safe, that feels like their children are learning, that they're really being prepared. So there'll be more, I'll say more school choice and different options coming on board for schools.
No, I appreciate that.
Thank you for that insight, Alana, into the whole decline in enrollment conversation.
But do you think children are getting a better education now? Like, do you fundamentally believe that they are getting a better education than, let's say, 2015?
I mean, that's a good question.
I think children are exposed to more information.
Right, they have more resources. Yeah, more
They're
access.
exposed to more information than they were in 2015, of course. In terms of a better education, I only say they're exposed to more information, which increases their knowledge. Um, Around certain topics and certain things as technology grows and expose students. Like in 2015, no one was speaking about AI in
Hmm.
2015. I,
Right.
I shouldn't say no one, at least it wasn't a broad conversation in education. In 2015, the average public school was not trying to. We were still struggling with trying to get people to integrate technology in 2015. But 2020, you were forced to
Yeah.
integrate technology. March, what was it? 13th, March
Oh,
20th, 2020.
remember the day.
Yep, that's the day.
You were forced to integrate technology on the fly.
Yep. And I think just to add to that, Marcus, I think from 2015, not only like, Dr. Jeff Holmes said it was more information, you got to fact check what's correct and what's not. Like we can all go over our social media feed right now and just go to a news feed and you'll see a story that looks good or looks like it's from a credible source and it's totally false. And I know, back 2015 or even 2010, 2005, you had your old, I'm gonna use a brick and mortar reference. You had your old encyclopedia that you have to go in and research and make sure it was from a legit source article where you can see anything beyond Wikipedia. I mean, you can just go on anything. You have to really check, okay, is this a credible source for correct information? Because you can get this information and it'll be totally slighted for an opinion based effort that may throw off the factual evidence you need to be correct in the learning, and then you're learning the wrong thing. So it could be dangerous where you got to be careful of knowing your source of how to trust it because you don't want to live in the land of having false information, with that too, within the educational process.
No, I mean, to Marcus's question, I would have to say I don't believe students are getting a better education now. I definitely agree with what Dr. Holmes shared that they have more access. I mean, basically, unlike in 2015, yes, we had cell phones, but it wasn't to the degree in which cell phones are operating today, where the kids they have the world at their fingertips at this moment in time. Like I go to my daughter who is in second grade, and she can go through YouTube videos to help assist her with the project we just did, and I don't even have to say anything. She just goes, looks it up, and obviously, like Marcel was saying, you definitely want to fact check that because yeah, anybody can post something on YouTube or any other various website and then say, yeah, this is what it is. The octopus has 12 arms instead of 8. But it's things like that. I don't think that they're necessarily receiving a better education due to the fact that they have access to so many resources. It kind of goes, I go back to what I shared earlier in the conversation about um, just making sure students are using these resources effectively to be more productive. And I still think that a human body is the best tool to make sure that that's happening. A human body is able to actually go in, is tangible for the students, it's a resource, it's the ultimate resource in the classroom, in my opinion, and it always will be. So, no,
Now, I'm not. I guess I'm not talking about the. Of course, I believe the same thing, but I mean, I'm talking about the advances in the curriculums and let's say how we talked about the modeling and reasoning, like having to have a deeper knowledge. And I'm not saying they are,
mhm.
they aren't, but I'm just wondering. Do we are we too like caught up in the moment right now and seeing things? We walk in and we may see a teacher not teaching to the level we think should. But I'm just talking about holistically, systemically. Do you think children are receiving a better education than maybe you received when you was in school? You know, and
That would
let me
be,
get- let me go back further than 2015. Let's go back to when you were in school, when you were in sixth, seventh, eighth grade, or fifth grade. Do you think the children today are receiving a better education than you received? Strip away your success that you've had as an adult, but what the actual fundamental education?
Yeah, I would still have to say I don't believe so. I just think it's adjusted for this era, particularly going back to technology. I think this era of technology, and I say that we are not. I would say we need to do a better job of preparing our students for tomorrow's problems. And I still think that we are not doing an effective job.
I think, another thing that I will say in terms of a better education, that's a good
Very
question
good question.
that we need to ask employers in the business community. What will they say? Have we our children better prepared? And I would venture to say, I would take a stab, and individuals will probably say no, because when we send children, what we do in schools, we're sending children out to the workforce. We're sending children out to be citizens, global citizens. Do we have better citizens? Do we have a stronger workforce?
But I think that's I have to slightly give you some pushback on that, because I think that if you're talking about us to them or whatever, like, I think a lot of good employees, and employers may say the work ethic is not the same, and I think that the work ethic is not the same because we probably have more, and that we had than what we had growing up, and so we had to work harder. We had to have a strong work. I think the work ethic is definitely worse now. But I'm just talking about the educational portion of it. Like, you
Yeah,
talk
just
about
being
how,
skilled,
yeah,
being
but
being
like, you talk
skilled.
about, I remember you always telling me the story about Carol Holmes making you, like, firing you, and that was your godfather because you did something crazy or whatever. You didn't want to do, but you had to have a work ethic. Like, your kids didn't have to grow up. Our kids don't have to grow up how we had to grow up, and work at McDonald's and so forth. But I'm just talking about the educational component of it.
But I
So
think
let me
that's a
let me
part
say
of it,
this.
though. I think that is a part of the educational experience, is learning and developing that work ethic. Whether that comes from being at home and your parents don't let you go to sleep until they checked over your homework and it is accurate, or to their, to whatever their expectation standards are. Um, I think it, like Dr. Holmes shared, that's a very good example or a good measuring rod of the effectiveness of today's educational system.
I
Are
mean, the outcome. Our assessment as educators come from the business world,
mhm.
right? What are they saying about what we have done with students? Okay. So for example, Marcus, when we look at um I've talked to, and I'm sure you have as well, talked to business partners, business owners, and they talk about students aren't able to write as well. I mean, the writing, and is that from technology where you get everything corrected for you on the computer? Writing has declined, and please don't let the cash register computer go on the blank and you ask for change. I just experienced that in the airport the other last week, 2 weeks ago, where one person, I gave them cash, and you know how you give them the change so you can get dollars? Watched a young man ask another man, "What do I do now?" Because he didn't push the change in to tell him how much change to give me back. And he asked his colleague, "Is this correct?" And the colleague said, "Yes." And I said, "You gave me $2 too many. Here." So both of them were wrong. And I'm just standing at the counter in the airport at the Arby's. So when you say, is it better? Think about your everyday interaction in businesses that you shop at. You can answer that question. Yes, customer service has declined. Absolutely. It's a thing of the past, in my opinion. Um, and just being able to articulate yourself, being able to express yourself in writing has declined.
For me, that's the competence of the workforce right now. Like, are individuals leaving the education system as a product that is going to be successful? And I'm pretty sure, just from those simple examples, and I'm pretty sure everybody was sitting here laughing and nodding their head when Dr. Holmes shared that, because I think we've all experienced that um, quite more frequently these past few years compared to previous years. Um,
And that's on us as educators. That's on us as educators, especially as school leaders.
mm,
We are the gatekeepers. School leaders are the gatekeepers. It is our responsibility to ensure that educators that serving under our leadership are equipped to do their jobs well.
mhm.
That's our responsibility. So we can't point the finger at anyone else If we're leading schools, school districts, and individuals are leading, says someone is following you, if the persons that's following you are not equipped, it is our responsibility to ensure that they are equipped so that we can get a better product. I think we have a lot. I think we've done well in education when you look at society as a whole, because the country has advanced, right? The country has advanced, but there's still work to be done.
Absolutely. There always will be. There's always room for improvement. I mean, for me, just to go back to the original question, um, I would like to see the assembly line of education be broken, and truly be readjusted to fit the specific needs of students. And I'm going far beyond just IEPs and anything like that. I'm talking about actually creating and curating an educational experience for individual students to be successful. And I say that because I had the pleasure of going to another school district through a conference called Nothing But Education. Phenomenal conference. Highly recommend that. And I was able to see a school where a school district that had a specialized program just like that, where they had a school basically like that old program, School Without Walls type thing. But it was an amazing program that they had instilled, where it was students that participated in like specialized programs. So whether they were a professional cricket player, whether they were on the gymnastics team and competing to be on the U.S. Olympic team, so on and so forth. It was a program where they could come and they had to do a certain amount of hours in person, but they also had the autonomy to do work virtually. They had teachers who would meet with them individually to ensure that they were meeting their, attaining mastery of specific standards for whatever subject matter that teacher was teaching. It was truly amazing, and I said that is the direction in which we should be going, especially since, like Dr. Holmes said, we were forced to go with that technology route the way we did, where every student got a device. Students were learning from home. Teachers were teaching remotely. I think that that was an opportunity for us to truly be innovative, and really take the next step in education. Like why? Like I don't understand. Like why are we not offering those type of experiences for students if we have the infrastructure now? Every school still has those devices where students can get a device, and let's say like you're not on a seventh grade math level, so we're going to have you tap into this virtual math six class and get the skills you need in order to bring you up and ensure that you're going to be successfully moving forward. I just think that if we really took a step back and really built out that plan, I think we would see an enormous amount of growth within students. You would definitely see students, the whole ethos of the school building change, because now students feel seen, they feel valued, they feel cared for, because now the schools are curtailing instruction specific for those students' needs.
I think sometimes we're so close to the work that we forget there is progress being made, like you just described. In Pennsylvania, there was an act passed in 2018, Act 158, and it created alternative pathways to education, to graduation. I'm sorry.
Mm,
Similar to what you just said, is like learning differently. PA is now allowing students to, I think, one, two, three, four, five different pathways to graduation. The grades or the attendance, you can prove proficiency through like project based learning or through CTE evidence, or your proficiency on the standardized test. So I think it's like it's taking schools a while to learn how to implement it and build the infrastructure to support the students to get there. So it's not a quick fix, but I think there are small steps towards breaking that assembly line.
Marcus, you didn't share. Where do you see schools at in the next 10 years? Might not
Sorry,
be
I was
there.
I was muted. I'm sorry. I think we really have to look at. I think we're underestimating the political climate. And so I just read an article this week where during this shutdown, the Linda McMahon, she basically wiped out the whole special education department in the Department of Education. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that we wouldn't have never thought about the blueprint. Like, you know what I'm saying? We wouldn't have never thought that you would have had No Child Left Behind. So I think a lot of education is predicated on what uh who's in office. I think elections do matter. And so and who wants to, like when you talk about school choice, when you talk about, these are, to me, a lot of attempts to destroy public education as we see it. And so I would like for it to be where we are. I like where we went in 10 years. When we started, I would have never thought, I've been born and raised in Prince George's County Public Schools. Went to Prince George's County Public Schools, taught in there. And I would have never known we would have specialty schools and dual enrollment and all these things that were brought to us in around the 2014, 15, 16 era. I think it's like to see my son go into the Academy of Health and he's going to PG college and he already getting college credits and he won his first time getting B's and he mad, you know what I'm saying? Like, and that struggle is real. Like, so I don't know what it would look like in 10 years. I hope we are preparing children for, different, um, like, I mean, I think I've seen the advances, where they point children to be engineers and things that they never pointed myself to and graduated in 97. Like it was like, the people that made money, you didn't really have to have education to have prosperity in Prince George's County when I was growing up. Neither one of my parents graduated from college. They worked in the federal government. My mother worked for the government. My dad worked for the federal government, worked 30 years, and moved to a nice house in Mitchellville, Bowie, and was cool. I would have never thought my wife would have lost her job in the federal government for doing nothing. You know what I'm saying? She lost a job in a matter of months. Everybody knows my wife, she's the most apolitical person in the world. Like she's gonna do her job to the best of her ability. So I think a lot of take things, I think, we have to mobilize, and be politically savvy. We have to start looking and talking to candidates that align with the vision that we have for what education should be, because they need our votes. I think a lot of times we don't do that. We don't think that that's our responsibility, and I think it has hurt us on a district level, county level, state level, and one bad election can set you back 4 or 5 years. And so, like I said, I don't know what 10 years will look like. I think, because we don't really. I mean, for us to be as educated as we are, um, we don't. A lot of times, we don't know what policies that a lot of these people are running on. They just hand us a sheet when we go into the going into the Bowie gym and say vote for this person, and we look at pictures that we see on the road and say, "Oh yeah, he like yeah, I know him," or somebody know him. Now I know Brother Holmes. That's why he Dr. Holmes, because he goes to those forums and stuff like that. But we don't really necessarily do those things, and so I think we need to really push, politics and getting some people that align with our vision of what we think education. I think what you think what you said it should be, Mike, and even Dr. Holmes and Sir Clement, like those are good things, but I think they need to know that our vote matters, and they can't just get our vote without wanting to push it that way.
One thing that I will say is, first of all, it does my heart good. Um, does my heart well to hear Marcus early on in his tenure as a principal speaking to being politically involved. When I came into the principalship in the early 2000s, it was all about the work inside the building. You kept your head down and just made certain that you were doing a good job for students. And to hear, I'm going to say, I became a principal in 2004. So 20 years later, to hear a principal who's early in their tenure saying we need to be more politically involved, I think that's huge progress. I think coach having individuals, I think educational leaders need to have conversations beyond education. For example, bringing Alana in, bringing in a politician, bringing in a state delegate or whomever. We have to now begin to have these cross professional conversations because all professions are impacted by education. So instead of having, rather than, not instead of, but in addition to having educators come together, you need to have non educators have these conversations with educators. That's a part of building our capacity. You know, you need to have the owner of restaurants and businesses and technology companies in on conversations with school leaders because then we come together and drive the political agenda. When the business community, the education community, the nonprofit community come together, like in settings like this, and have this conversation about their next employees, and individuals that we're putting, we need to have that conversation and we push the conversation with politicians. Because Marcus is absolutely right in terms of political agendas will continue. And the reason why things are moving the way that they're moving is because educators, many educators have not been involved. Yes, we have a huge organization called the National Education Association, but they can't do it. They need boots on the ground, people in school buildings as a part of their conversation, not individuals who are toward the end of their career. Then we join and say we're going to push. And another group that we must tap into are parents, because McMahon can do what she want to do at this point. But when parents mobilize whose children have disabilities, it's going to be a problem for every administration. States are going to have to, the federal government can take the, but states are going to have to pick up the issue. If the federal government said we will no longer support IDEA, parents are not going to allow states to walk away from that because that's a benefit to them and their children. So it's not going to go away because there's too much at stake, and for children who learn differently. And so we have to, in that conversation, brother coach, with the nonprofit world, the politicians, the school leaders, and the parents. Parents are not informed. They're voters too. As a matter of fact, they have a larger voice than school leaders because it's more of them than there is us.
Appreciate that.
I'll just add
About to
this.
say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just add this. You know, just hearing this conversation just makes me, and once again, I'm going to throw another sport reference. It's just thinking about different eras. It's just, you know, thinking about just going back to Marcus's original question, you know, when you think about our best teacher that we had when we were a student, if they would be placed in this era, like how would they do? Or if you flip it, teach the best teacher you have in this era, how would they do back when we was in, let's say, our middle school days in 6th, 7th, 8th grade? And I'm trying to think about it, and I'm just thinking about some of the great teachers that I have. I think will be some adjustments that would need to be done to fit in that era. But going back to the work ethic, going back to knowing the needs of who you're working with, that will always make the foundations of what makes us successful. And it's like we always tell ourselves, if we knew what we knew now back then, how we would do better, it's all about the preparation that you would have in order to make it successful, regardless of where you are, because you'll always find that adjustment. You'll always find that modification of what you would do to be successful. But do you have that mindset or knowing how to communicate and use those resources for that success?
When I think about that, uh, Marcellus, when I think about teachers, so for example, I'm still in touch with my 7th grade science teacher, right? I went to her 50th wedding vow renewal, right? And if she had to teach today, she would be fine because she is so one, I think teachers of the past would fare I might jump out there and say they may fare better because first of all, you had more individuals trained to teach.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They were trained to teach. And we had individuals that were, and everyone has, people who are not, but by and large, you had people committed to the profession. So I know I can say with full confidence, my seventh grade teacher, and I have no shame in saying I'm 55 years old. My seventh grade science teacher would be fine because you know why? Number one, she will stay up and do what it takes.
Figure it out.
And watch this novel I did. She had a lesson plan every day.
What is that?
She had a lesson plan with objectives and outcomes every day. She would be fine. She would need some assistance with technology, like all of us, not all of us, many of us, as we get older and technology moves faster than us. But once they catch on, they'll be fine. Like most of them many of them have caught on to Facebook and they're working Facebook. Those individuals want to learn, they want to do well, and they were trained educators. I mean, just think about when we were in school, how many, if I look back, how many, very few individuals were considered provisional
Mm.
or career changers. People went to college to teach. They didn't go to, very few people went to college as a psychology major. Now they're a first grade teacher. I didn't see that when I was in elementary school. They went to teachers' colleges and learned how to deliver information to little people. So I think they would be fine. They would catch on. And what they didn't know, they would build such a relationship with their students, like teachers are doing today, that the children will help close the technology gap for them.
That's true. That's true. So again, well, family, that's our time for today. I definitely want to give a shout out to my esteemed panel. Thank you, Miss Alana Gali, my man Marcellus Clement, Mr. M. Dollars, Mr. Marcus Young, and my man Dr. Jeff Holmes. Thank you all for joining us and helping me to make sense of this educational evolution. If today's conversation made you reflect, please share it with a colleague, a teacher, or even a parent. And remember, healing starts with honest conversations. I'm Michael Coach, and this has been the Academic Therapy Podcast. Until next time, take care of yourself and each other.